What is the philosophy of Bitcoin? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher's Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. Today I have with me Jeff Crichton. He is a Bitcoin enthusiast and expert, and he is a lay philosopher, but definitely interested in all kinds of ideas. And we got to talking about Bitcoin, and it was interesting to me. He threw at me the idea of philosophy of Bitcoin. So that kind of threw me at first. I was sort of, in fact, that's one of my first questions I want to talk to you about. Because I thought, Bitcoin, isn't that just alternative money? Like, how can there be a philosophy of Bitcoin? So can you first talk about that? What is the philosophy of Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's a great question. When you think about Bitcoin came out in about 2008. But really, it started back in the 80s out of what's called the cypherpunk movement, and that was the idea that there's a bunch of technologists that got together and started worrying about privacy and digital privacy. Mm-hmm. And so from the 1980s onward, they attempted to solve how do we protect our digital identity? How do we make sure government or bad actors don't get to our digital information? They saw the world going digital. And so they thought about all sorts of things, communication, email, and part of the thing they thought about was money.
In the 80s, they were thinking about email already.
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't realize email was even around back then.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people saw the writing on the wall.
Oh, okay.
And it was this group of people called the cypherpunks, and so I know a little bit about them, but I really started to understand a little bit more once Bitcoin came out in 2008.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like ideas have consequences, and economics. Your ideas around economics have consequences. So it's just a multifaceted idea where you can think about Bitcoin in terms of money. You can think about it in terms of technology. You can think about it in terms of free speech. Mm-hmm. All these type of ideas are all wrapped up into this one concept of Bitcoin, and so you could go deep down any rabbit hole when it comes to Bitcoin. So yeah, there's definitely philosophy behind Bitcoin.
All right, very cool, very cool. Then I guess my next question is, when I think of Bitcoin, it seems like, and so I should say right off the bat, I don't own any Bitcoin personally, and I'm not.
But after today,
today is going to be the impetus where I will change my mind. No, I don't know. I don't have a dog in the fight necessarily. I'm pretty open one way or another to seeing. But when I hear it, it has this connotation for me as this alternative to regular currency, and it sounds like at some time it has the suspicion for me that it could be destabilizing for a national currency. Mm-hmm. Do you think about it? Is that a possibility, and if so, is there any justification for using it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your perspective. I think Bitcoin's ultimate goal is to be the world's currency.
Oh, okay.
The way people save money and transact money in Bitcoin, and so from a number of perspectives, it could be destabilizing to the dollar, which the dollar is the reserve currency of the world right now. People trade in the dollar, and so I could see if Bitcoin comes to where we all hope and believe, it could be destabilizing to the dollar. But other countries and other people, they have currencies that are already very unstable. Mm-hmm. And so this is also maybe a lifeboat to them. You think about maybe Venezuela or any other kind of countries where there's 100% inflation or more on a monthly, yearly basis. This is potentially a lifeboat for them. Maybe somebody in the dollar, this looks maybe like a volatile currency, but people outside of the U.S., this is a potentially supreme value for them.
Well, luckily we don't have to deal with inflation, right? So, just joking. So yeah, that's an interesting fact that If there were just all Bitcoin, that we would not have any inflation. Is that the idea?
Well, technically Bitcoin is on a deflationary schedule, meaning there's like a fixed supply. There's not going to be any more.
Yeah.
And so if all of the Bitcoin were released right now, you could potentially slowly see a decrease in prices over time, potentially. And, we saw that in the U.S. for the first couple hundred years of the U.S. You saw the dollar was pretty stable throughout the first 200 years of the U.S.'s history. And then around 1913, when we started the Federal Reserve System, if you look at that, then, the dollar has lost 90+% of its value since then. But the first 200 years, where we didn't have the Federal Reserve System, we had a pretty stable, slightly deflationary currency. And to me, that's what I look at, and I look at the history of the U.S., and we were able to have a strong, growing economy in the 1700s, 1800s, and we didn't need the Federal Reserve during that time to get out of recessions or to create more currency. But then in 1913, a lot of things were happening around the world. World War I, World War II, that created the need for governments to find more money. And one of the things they turned to was creating central banks that potentially could issue money that's not necessarily backed by the gold standard. And so that probably leads me to back up a little bit. Like historically, if you look at the last couple thousand years of the world and the thinking about money and the medium of exchange, the whole world kind of settled on gold as the standard of transacting and storing value. And then so until recently, we kind of went off the gold standard. But before that, we'd all kind of settled on it. And you talked about, is it destabilizing to the world? We were on one standard back in the day, a couple hundred years, 100 years ago or so.
True.
We were on the gold standard. I mean, there was silver and other currencies you could use, but gold was really the standard. And so for me, I see Bitcoin as kind of replacing the gold standard kind of going forward.
Yeah, I suppose it would be even more stable than gold because there's no way of discovering more Bitcoin.
Well,
hitting gold mines.
I would say it's very similar to gold. So gold increases roughly like 3% a year from mining. And right now Bitcoin's right about, I think it's around 3% that's increased every year.
Oh, it's increased.
Up to 21 million. So I think it's by 2140,
okay.
if we're not going to be alive that long, but 2140 there's not going to be any more released. And so it's on a decreasing release schedule. Every 10 minutes a little bit is released by miners. Similar to gold, where there's miners that go get gold.
Oh, okay.
There's also these
I did not know that.
these computers that mine Bitcoin, and they get the new Bitcoin about every 10 minutes.
Okay.
But they serve a really important function, and that's to what's called proof of work. And so every 10 minutes, Bitcoin is kind of a decentralized ledger where everybody can see all the transactions that are happening. But they need, historically we needed a central authority to say, okay, this was a transaction and this was a transaction, and nobody was double spending. And so the question is, without a central authority, how do you do that? And so that's where this concept of mining came about and proof of work. And so this is the idea that every 10 minutes, these miners are bringing all the transactions that they've found on the network together, and they're putting them in order, they're validating them against all the rules, and then they're performing this proof of work exercise, which is kind of randomly generating these numbers until they get the right mathematical function. And whoever gets it first then gets to put that transaction together and make a block. And that's why it's called a blockchain. So they have these block of transactions, and that they are the first ones, and they get the Bitcoin tied to being released every 10 minutes. And so it's a key concept of Bitcoin is this proof of work. And so that's kind of with mining, there's if someone pulled gold, if someone has gold, at some point they did work to get it. They didn't work maybe they were gifted it or something, but at some point, if you trace it back to its history, somebody had to do work to dig it out of the ground or something like that. And so it's similar with Bitcoin. If you got Bitcoin, somebody did work to pull that out or to get it. And basically the work they're doing now is generating electricity on their computers to solve these mathematical formulas. And then if they're the first ones to solve it, then they get the Bitcoin every 10 minutes.
So, and these transactions are all public.
Yeah.
Is there any concern about them being public? I mean, because one of the founding ideas was that we were concerned with privacy.
Yeah.
Is there any concern about everything being public?
I mean, I think there definitely is concern. So it's not totally anonymous because you can track people's transactions. So if you tie yourself to a Bitcoin address, someone then can look at that address and see, okay, where was the Bitcoin sent from there? Okay, went over here, and then so you can kind of track it from there. Mm-hmm. So if you connect your identity with that initial address, then yeah, your anonymity isn't there anymore.
Okay.
So it's more like pseudonymous. So you can't really see on its surface, but people could kind of figure it out if they do enough research. And there are companies like Chain Analysis that have been set up and kind of work with the government to sometimes understand these transactions and find people.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you think it would be would it be in the best interest of users to have laws against that sort of research?
You mean to make it more anonymous?
Yeah, like because I know it seems like Bitcoin users want the most hands-off government approach. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like they have this issue with anonymity. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Yeah,
I mean, I think like you mentioned, the cypherpunks, they're worried about being the bad actors or the government. Maybe the government goes 1984 style, and so it's really trying to track people down. And so there was that concern. So I think you can become more private with your Bitcoin transactions, mm-hmm. And make sure, like, there's the term KYC, which means that whenever you buy your Bitcoin through an exchange, you have to give them your information. Mm-hmm. And so now then your information is tied to your Bitcoin transaction. So most people go through that process, but there are ways to buy Bitcoin or get Bitcoin without sharing your identity. So now, do I think it, from more of a philosophical standpoint, I think anonymity is good because I just anticipate there's certain times where somebody isn't going to like what I do, even if I don't think it's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, as a Christian or something, I anticipate times maybe where I support causes that culture doesn't support or the world doesn't support, and maybe that means the government doesn't support it.
Yeah.
And they might try and block my transaction.
Your social credit score.
Social credit score. I even think about like the truckers' rebellion up in Canada,
where
people tried to give money to them, but it went through traditional means, and all of a sudden the government was able to step in and stop it.
Freeze bank accounts.
And so, or just know who you are too, just the anonymity side. And so Bitcoin allows, it's not fully there, but Bitcoin allows that that potential of being more anonymous and not being able to be tracked. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. What do Bitcoin enthusiasts think is good about the decentralization of money?
Yeah, it's good question. I mean, one of the things that I think about that drew me to Bitcoin was removing money from control by the government. When I studied history and I studied monetary history, I saw the government using the central bank almost as a weapon. Mm-hmm. I think about like World War I, back to World War I, and the fact that prior to World War I, wars were not as destructive as long because you needed to have enough funds and resources to fight your wars. Once you ran out of that, then the war was over. But after creating central banks, they found a way to create money out of thin air, and that's why we call it fiat currency, just by declaration. Hey, this is valuable, this is the currency. And they were able to delay that reckoning and not exactly have the resources, but by creating more money, they basically stole it from every other holder of that money. So, if we created 10% more currency, all of a sudden everyone had 10% less value.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, as that money flows through the system, everybody's value just decreases. And so they were able to, through fiat currency system, extend war, pay off debts, finance more, more supplies and armory and things like that, and in my opinion, extended the war. And so to me, there's definitely like moral component for me seeing this central authority have control over money. I saw it as definitely a net negative. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have a central authority, how are you going to coordinate all transactions? How are you going to make sure people aren't double spending and following rules and things like that? And that's where Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder of Bitcoin, came up with this ingenious protocol called Bitcoin that allows for decentralization. Don't have a central authority, but you have multiple miners and nodes that interact with each other to create validation of transactions, to allow you to send value to other people around the world who participate on the Bitcoin network.
Yeah.
So I definitely see decentralization as a positive in this regard, for sure.
Okay, cool. Would you say Bitcoin is egalitarian?
Good question. I think as I think about that question, I think about one of the reasons I like Bitcoin is that I see the central monetary authority. I think about inflation, and I think about inflation in terms of who does that hurt the most. And for me, when I look at the economy, I think about the people who don't have assets or on the lowest rung of the economic ladder.
Philosophers.
Yeah, as such as yourself. So people that aren't protected by inflation. So if you have a lot of money, people know that I should buy real estate. Why are they buying real estate? Is it really increasing in value, or is it the fact that it's a fixed, scarce asset that can't be replicated? And so if you have more and more dollars chasing it, the value is just going to keep going up. And so if you're living on minimum wage or something like that, you're not going to have the funds to invest in assets. And so all you see is that the dollars that you hold are just decreasing in value every year, and you don't see anything else increasing in value. And so to me, that's what I think about when you ask me that question about egalitarian. I think the current system is opposite egalitarian. It's a regressive tax on poorer people. And so for me, I see Bitcoin as a way to opt out of that system. Mm-hmm. And for you to say, okay, I don't want $10 US dollars. I want a Bitcoin, a portion of a Bitcoin, and I know that's scarce, and I know that somebody can't create it out of thin air, and I know, or I believe it's going to go up in value over time. I can store my wealth in that form.
Okay. Yeah. Is Bitcoin necessarily globalist?
Well, I don't know exactly what globalist means, but I mean, the first thing I think about is like the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
Having a plan for the world. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you mean, but to me, in terms of the global elites or the World Economic Forum trying to push central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, I would say it's not globalist. It would be anti their agenda because they want to have a currency that they can control and manipulate. One of the things I just read actually today is that the Chinese central bank currency, they have this digital yuan where they're going to give it to you, but it's going to have an expiration date on it. So you have to spend it or it expires.
That's awful.
So, so all that saying, like, I don't believe it's globalist in terms of giving someone else control of my money.
Yeah. So
to me, it's anti-globalist in that situation, but I think it's also globalist in terms of, back in the day we were on a gold standard throughout the world mostly, and that allowed people to transact. Everyone believed in the value of gold, and so it was easy to trade. Right now, you have to do multiple trades in order to trade. If you don't know what medium of currency you want to exchange with, you got to find the right currency. And so, I think it would promote more international trade. Make that easier if everyone was on a Bitcoin standard. So I think it would promote globalism from that regard, but nobody would be controlling it from the top down.
That's interesting. So it'll make it like a global commodity, but not like a global government.
Yeah, nobody control. I mean, that's the amazing thing about Bitcoin is the fact that nobody controls it.
Yeah.
All these other alternative coins, altcoins as they're called, they're all controlled by somebody, some group of people.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin is not controlled, by any group of people. It's controlled by the users, the people that run nodes. And in about 2016, 2017, a lot of people wanted to change the code of Bitcoin, and they wanted to alter it. They wanted the blocks to be the block transactions that are brought together every 10 minutes to be bigger. Right now, I think they're 2 megabytes. They wanted to be bigger to handle more transactions. And so they had a lot of money, and they had a lot of influence, and they tried to change the code, and they couldn't because they needed all the users to accept it. So they ended up just copying the code of Bitcoin and creating a new code and trying their own currency. And so anyone's free to copy the Bitcoin code right now and run their own thing, but are people going to buy into it? Are people going to believe in it? Are people going to trust it? Bitcoin definitely has the name recognition and the history there. And so people tried to change it and couldn't change it. And so that to me has given me more faith in the system because of its stability over time. It's been around since 2008, so it has a long track record.
Is Bitcoin anarchist?
Interesting question. I think there is a strain of Bitcoin of believers in Bitcoin that really don't want anything to do with the government and see the government as interfering, and definitely an anarcho-capitalist strain within Bitcoin, that kind of ideology. But at the same time, I do believe it does set up a rules-based system that you can trust and know that, okay, a block is going to be created every 10 minutes. And you know that if you put your transaction into the network, it's going to get processed. And so from that standpoint, I feel like it's a rules-based system, but it isn't a government top-down controlled system. So I think if your definition of anarchy is that there's no government control involved, I think that is true, but there is definitely rules and a system in place that you need to abide by if you want to participate. At my house, I do run a full node, so my node is responsible for enforcing the rules of the Bitcoin network on the transactions. So it's still a rules-based system. So in that regard, I wouldn't call it anarchist.
Yeah, so it follows by very strict rules, it sounds like, and it's just not beholden to any central authority.
Yeah, maybe fiat rules or government rules. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
Does Bitcoin make us more free, and if so, in what ways?
Yeah, I definitely think it makes us more free. I think about what I brought up earlier about the trucker rebellion up in Canada. I think it allows us to get to a point of it doesn't allow anyone to censor your transaction. If somebody doesn't like your transaction, they can't really stop you from participating in the network. They can't freeze your funds, things like that. So I think from a free speech perspective, some people have called Bitcoin, it's just text, so it's speech. Like, it should be covered under the freedom of speech laws. Really? Yeah, as a concept. So that's pretty fascinating. And so from that perspective, I feel like that makes us more free. It also makes us more free just in terms of the value that I create. I believe with Bitcoin, I have a more stable place to put the value that I create. I work, somebody pays me, and now I'm able to put that into a system that I trust more than another system maybe that I don't trust. Yeah. Or maybe a system that I believe in more than, I don't necessarily like maybe what the government is doing with dollars, so I don't want to participate in that system. So it gives you more options. And money is half of every transaction, around the world, right? Somebody's exchanging something for money, and so it's an important part of our free market system.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. That's all we're going to do for today. Don't forget to support this project on my Patreon page. I don't take Bitcoin just yet, but if you want to contribute Bitcoin, man, I'm not going to turn it down.
Yeah, let's turn them into a Bitcoiner.
Yeah, that could be the small pebble that begins the avalanche. Who knows? And don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video, and comment. And comment any questions you have, and I can get them to Jeff, and he can answer the questions for you too. So let me know if you got any questions. And that's all we have for today. Adios.